Are you ready to rewind? Take a nostalgia-filled ride back to a simpler time. It's Acid Wash Memories, a retro pop culture celebration. And now your hosts, Joe Murata and Michael Quinn.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 39 of Acid Wash Memories, a retro pop culture celebration. Today, we are talking all about hair metal. My name is Joe Murata, alongside our favorite headbanger, Michael Quinn. How you doing there, Michael?
Here I go again on my own.
Yeah, folks, thank you for not being on your own as you listen to Acid Wash Memories. We really do appreciate you being with us here. And hey, if this happens to be your first time, to tell you what we do, we talk about something different every single week from the retro pop culture realm. Each episode is completely different, and we have 38 other episodes available where, Quinn?
In the archives.
In the archives, so you can check out something. And whether you're a first-timer or a long-timer, we do advise you to go follow us at AWM Podcast on Twitter, and also join, if you want to talk, our Facebook group. That is Acid Wash Memories on Facebook. You can just find it, join it, and hang out with us there and talk. Hang and headbang.
Headbang, yeah.
If you will. So, that's it. All the particulars out of the way. It was breezy.
That's it. Nice and breezy.
Very brisk. Today we're talking about hair metal, glam metal, pop metal. There's various different ways to define this, which was, as I'm sure some of our fans, or maybe all of our fans know, a very popular, energetic, loud, but most importantly, a radio-friendly and a video-friendly brand of music and fashion that swept through the 80s into the 90s.
Heavy metal is a big money business with legions of devoted fans.
So I guess this is the, pardon the pun, the growth and the fallout of hair metal.
That was friggin' horrible.
Quinn, what is hair?
It's a thing that grows on your head.
Okay.
It's a follicle. It grows, and some people cut it, some people grow it long.
Oh, really?
It's got kind of like a style thing going on, right? It's the one part of your body you can change around, right?
Yeah, conventionally anyway, yes.
Other than facial hair, too. But
you could do that, but it's hair.
Yeah, it's always hair. Hair is the only thing you can really mess with.
You heard it here first.
People figured out how to mess with it this time.
Oh, in the 80s, they sure did.
Want to change the way you look? Turn on the crimper from Winmere.
If you've never heard Acid Wash Memories, or especially one of our music episodes, or any episode where there's a lot of ground to cover,
a lot of hair to cover.
Well, we apologize in advance for any artists or songs that we will not mention. Okay,
yes. We can't get it all.
The researchers in Ogden, they're busy. Okay, they're doing their best, but. We apologize for that, and we apologize for any offensive terms such as hair metal, because I know that isn't, that's a derogatory term, really.
It is?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't used originally anyway.
Hair metal is something that was hated just as much as it was successful in the mid to late 80s.
If you've never really paid attention to what hair metal was, I'd be very surprised. But if you haven't, it's the number one characteristic, I think, is that there's big hair involved in all the musicians.
Yes. Leather.
They wear a lot of leather, sometimes leopard print.
Yeah.
Like prints, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Textures, fabrics, and things. Sometimes makeup, They make pouty faces, the band members. They do pouties.
Sometimes there's like animals involved, like tigers and
or
stuff.
Or a snake.
Yeah, or snakes.
Some kind of rock.
Yeah.
Like a literal rock. Like a mountain of some kind.
Type of a building.
And then the band themselves, they're generally very competent. These aren't bad musicians we're talking about. They get a bad name.
But they usually have a character, right?
Right, it's more about theatrics.
Right, so it's kind of like... And this was always the funny thing when I was a kid with these guys, is that I thought they were nuts or something, right?
Sure.
But then you learn later on that it's all like just like...
Well, some of it.
It's just some of them are crazy.
Yeah.
But most of them are not. I don't know, that once all this was over, they just either cut their hair and got real jobs or like something. I don't know.
Well, you have like your D. Snyder's, a very intelligent man, right? Your Alice
became like
Coopers.
a politician.
Exactly.
Like the hair just came off and they just all dispersed and went and did other things, right?
It's very cute. It's a very quaint way to wrap up the story. But yeah, generally they're, you got a lead guitarist, probably a rhythm guitarist. You have a bass player. And you have a drummer. That's your bare minimum. It's standard rock quartet instrumentally. But normally you have a standalone lead singer in these hair metal bands, the prototypical ones. And normally that lead singer is very good looking or wants to be very good looking or portrays himself as very good looking.
Yes.
Maybe sings really high, can get the high notes and shriek. Very charismatic. And usually the number two, the lieutenant, is the flashy lead guitarist.
Yes.
I'm talking your David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen.
Right.
Right? Like there's always the number 2, like the lieutenant, the second in command,
Yeah,
the,
or
the
that,
Tin Man, if you will.
Or sometimes that's the guy who's actually the most talented guy.
Right.
And they're like, he's not like a personality as much, but he can grow his hair too. He's okay doing that. But outside of that, he doesn't want to say much.
He's just going to play his solos, man.
Right. And so the lead man kind of takes the heat for him.
Exactly. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Like in the front lines,
Yeah.
right? Front man. A big fat drum sound you'll find on a lot of these top 40 hits or the videos, you know. Thick drum sounds.
I always love these drummers because they always have these kits that have like way more than normal drum stuff. When I tried to learn the drums, I was like, "What is all of this shit?" Like,
Yeah, because
who does this? Why?
2 bass drums, you know, 12 cymbals.
Yeah.
It's very important.
It was tragic, really. He exploded on stage.
And a lot of these songs that were popular have arena-friendly choruses, radio-friendly choruses. But I think most of all, as a genre, it was very listenable.
Yes.
And I'm not here to go down the rabbit hole of what is metal and what isn't metal, right? Because it's not metal in the sense that maybe Metallica or Slayer or Anthrax or Lamb of God would come to mind. It's not that style of metal.
Right.
It's pop music, really, with a metal instrumental backing.
Yeah, it's a little rougher pop music.
Yeah,
That's all it is.
but-
It's like it's got a slight edge.
Right. And you know what? I'm here to say there's anything wrong with it. I do have a palate for it. I'm not afraid to admit it.
Who doesn't? It was all over the radio, and even like after the era, like you would, turn on a Q104 or something like that, and they'd be like,
It's true.
we got this stuff, the hard rock, or where they never call it hair metal.
Always hard rock, yeah. But I do like it. Do you like it?
Yeah, I don't mind it.
In doses, proper doses, I like it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend that I want to listen to it all day, every day, or anything like that. I'm not a metalhead of any ilk.
I find its presence after it was popular kind of funny. I feel like I heard it a lot in the 90s, even though like there was other things that were like the out in front stuff.
Yes.
But like it's still like was just on the radio.
It was still on the radio, especially the big hits, right?
Yeah, but that's kind of funny for something that its glory days had passed, but it kind of still lingered around, but not even like new stuff.
Yeah, just the old hits would linger. That's a good point. Yeah, for me, it evokes like my early childhood. I'm talking like the late 80s, the early 90s. It just reminds me of that because when I was first becoming cognizant of music and things around me, this was still a predominantly popular genre of music.
Correct.
So I remember it being on MTV because my mom watched a lot of MTV.
The videos were still on.
They were still
Absolutely.
on all over the radio. And
My dad really liked this kind of music too, I think.
He did. He like glam metal?
And I don't know, glam metal.
liked
but
hard rock,
He called
right?
it hard rock. So,
Yeah.
But it was all the same.
Eventually, if you don't care, it's all the same. You know?
Yeah, it all just
It's
merged together.
music, yeah. But it's worth talking about because it really did. We're a retro pop culture podcast, and it dominated pop culture of the 80s into the 90s, not just music, but also fashion. And then it fell quick and hard in the early 90s, which
To
we
the
will
point
talk
of being
about.
like a parody, like Wayne's World and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Wayne's World is a very timely parody of the culture kind of surrounding that.
This is the Gasworks, an excellent heavy metal bar. Always a babe fest. And they got a food table, too.
But we wouldn't be Acid Wash Memories if we didn't get into at least somewhat of the origins of hair metal. And
Is this going to go to the 20s or something, Joe?
No, you know what?
Like somehow.
We're not this time.
Okay.
We're going to pick it up in the 60s.
Yeah? Good.
We're going to play a bunch of music for you on this one. Not dissimilar to the way we did our 90s One-Hit Wonders episode, where we're just listening to snippets of music.
Right.
We think that'll be fun for you guys. It's a music episode. We have them every now and then, and this is one of them. So we're picking up the history of heavy metal, and this is a very broad term again. I know there's subgenres upon subgenres of all of this and debates and arguments on forums and Reddit, and I'm not a part of that, and I don't want to be. I'm speaking in broad strokes here, okay? You metalheads out there? But really, heavy metal was an outgrowth of hard rock. And when I'm saying hard rock, I'm talking about, the rock and roll era started in the 50s with, Chuck Berry being one of them and Little Richard. In the 60s, the Beatles fused certain genres of music together, and the British invasion happened. And out of that, around that time, you started to get a lot of British hard rock. I'm talking the Yardbirds, the Kinks dabbled in hard rock a lot. Cream being a huge example.
What's interesting to me is that this hard rock it does not resemble the hair metal
No.
that was to come.
It
right?
really doesn't.
By the time you got to the 80s, this stuff seemed tame.
Correct.
Right?
100%.
It didn't even seem like you could put hard on top of it, right?
Right, it was just
seemed
rock.
it just seemed like classic rock or something.
Yeah, in our eyes it is, right?
Yeah.
But to give you an idea, folks, we're talking, the Kinks are the mid-'60s and Cream mid-'60s. Rock and roll as a popular genre is only a little over a decade old, and this just goes to show you how far it went from Bill Haley's
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock.
to a song like Sunshine of Your Love by Cream.
Right.
It's getting near dawn when lights close the tired eyes.
Much heavier, right? Even though maybe tame by 80s or today's standards.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix also had a lot to do with it. The psychedelic, the acid rock,
Jimi
hard
Hendrix
rock.
is almost closer because his was just all over the place.
Yeah, and-
right. It's like that to me is a little more wild than even Cream. Yeah,
I would say so. And Jimmy set a standard, the right word, a prototype for the flashy, technically proficient virtuoso guitarist.
It was his experience, and not the other guys. Just saying.
It wasn't Mitch Mitchell's experience back
No.
there on the kit? Okay.
Yeah.
There was a band known as Blue Cheer that got heavy with their cover of Summertime Blues. The MC5, Steppenwolf, Born to Be Wild.
Steppenwolf's a little closer to the style that we're talking about.
But then also in the late 60s, in England, we had what became known as the Unholy Trinity, or the Unholy Trio, of three bands that formed roughly around the same time that added a different dimension to this hard rock scene, because the New Yardbirds, as they were briefly known in 1968... the new version. They became a band you might have heard of known as Led Zeppelin.
So Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin.
Now Led Zeppelin,
is a
they're like,
forerunner here.
to me, this is kind of the birth, right?
It is, in a lot of
Carol,
people's
whoever's
eyes.
probably going, Led Zeppelin is really good.
I'm going to get the one out. I'm 79 and I ate my teeth. But
I knew them.
I knew them so
every
much.
episode, it's like I was their best friend.
I love Jimmy Page.
At about this time in 1968, Led Zeppelin was signed to their contract on Atlantic Records here in the U.S.
Led Zeppelin's first album, which was released in 1969, had a bunch of songs on it that you guys probably know if you've ever listened to the radio. I'm going to play one just to give an idea of where we've come from by the end of the 60s here. This is a Communication Breakdown, one of the more popular songs from the first Led Zeppelin album. And what you're hearing here, again, there's debate if this is metal, if Led Zeppelin was ever truly metal. But what they're doing is setting a template, in my mind.
I think you could definitely classify this a little bit, but the other thing is the punk movement definitely takes an influence from this too. This feels like this feels like a punk song.
Yeah, punk definitely took influence in some regard from Zeppelin. Maybe John Bonham and his drumming style.
But I mean, a lot of people took influence from Zeppelin, right? I mean, they were considered in their time. I have heard people say this is people thought Led Zeppelin was going to be they're how the Beatles transformed everything. People thought this.
Yeah, they
right?
weren't critical darlings the way the Beatles were, but
right,
in terms
but they
of
were
transform, yeah, maybe.
They were considered transformative. Does that make sense?
In a way they were, I think, yeah. And they also kind of set they're a good example, not the first, of the charismatic, flashy lead singer in Robert Plant doing the shrieking vocals.
Right.
And the very talented guitarist, songwriter Jimmy Page.
Right.
And that was an early template of that. Another band, completely different sound than Led Zeppelin, but that formed in 1969 as well.
Nice.
And released their first album in 1970. Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
Paranoid. Here's another forerunner to the metal sound.
Yep.
This is Ozzy's band, obviously.
Yes.
I think you guys all know that,
Mr.
right?
Ozfest himself.
Yeah, Mr. Ozfest.
The guy who sits on his couch and tries to figure out remote controls now.
Well, it could be very hard.
Yeah.
And this is just a classic song. And if you're saying this isn't hair metal, yeah, I know.
Not yet. Not yet. But we gotta set the stage.
We're
right?
setting the stage.
But I mean, what's funny about Ozzy to me is Ozzy feels like a direct connection because he would become part of the hair metal scene by the time the 80s came along.
He did. He adopted the hair metal look even for a while in the 80s, you know?
Exactly.
Because it was fashionable.
Right, but Ozzy was still around, so he's like a direct connection.
He is a direct connection. And this next band, the third of the Unholy Trinity, or the Unholy Trio, would be Deep Purple. Most people would know them, if nothing else, for Smoke on the Water because of that riff.
Right.
But they were around long before Smoke on the Water and long after a break. And this is from their 1971 album. The name of this song is Bloodsucker. Let's take a listen to Deep Purple and see what they were doing around the same time.
That sounds very similar.
So this was all coming in around the late 60s, early 70s, this sound.
Yeah, there was a change of foot.
There was a change of foot. Now, this is all in England, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there's a totally separate brand of hard rock that is emerging in the early 70s known as glam rock. It wasn't hard like what we just heard, which is almost bordering on metal. It was like glittery, cabaret-like, theatrical.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of glam, if you will.
Glamorous. You know what's funny about all this is like the British and the glam.
Yeah.
I do feel like punk is some weird, like the more we listen to this, it's some weird like stepchild of all of this.
In some ways it is. In some ways punk was a reaction to a lot of the decadence also.
True. But I mean, the sound of it is very similar.
The sound of it, the energy.
Yeah.
And glam metal, which again, hair metal, we'll get to it, did take some cues from punk in terms of the energy, I'd say. Yeah, the intensity. So one of the big glam bands was T-Rex, which, yes, in fact, does stand for Tyrannosaurus Rex.
I mean, it's a notable dinosaur.
It is. This is Bang a Gong by T-Rex, 1971.
Right.
So much different sound than the previous three bands we just heard.
And this feels like also you're fusing some of that 60s hippie stuff going on.
Exactly.
A little bit.
A little bit. Another artist who dabbled in the glam scene, might have heard of him, kind of popular, known as David Bowie.
Yeah, him.
Remember him? You ever heard of him?
The thing is with David Bowie,
He did everything.
He did everything.
He did.
Right?
He
So
did.
if there was a thing that existed in his time, he's like, I'll do that.
I'll do it.
However he sounds, whatever.
That's a great impression.
Yeah. Like, but that's what he did, right? Like, I feel like David Bowie would like travel the world and like find music scenes and be like, I'm gonna kind of like try that. I'm gonna do a song like that. And then his next song would be something completely freaking different.
It's like he's going around like Pac-Man, just eating.
Yeah, just like, it's like, I'll give it a shot.
I'll give it a shot. So the Ziggy Stardust persona was very much glam rock.
Right.
And here is a quick snippet of Suffragette City from 1972. So again, sound-wise, we are not anywhere near Zeppelin.
Yeah. Again, we keep ending up, I think, more towards punk.
Well, yeah,
or like new wave even, but like
a little bit.
This is more new wavy.
This is more new wavy.
Yeah.
The next band that I want to profile here very much typified a glam rock band. Quinn, have you ever heard of or seen, and if not, I don't blame you, the New York Dolls?
I've heard.
You've heard of them?
Yeah.
So I happen to be a pretty big fan of the Dolls, and what the New York Dolls did is they dressed the part like no one had really done before.
But I mean, in their day, what they're doing, this is also partially to do like a shock. We're going to dress like women.
Yes.
But we're men, and like, you know, everyone's going to notice us because, I mean, that's what these bands were doing, right?
Yes.
At this time, too. Part of it was just to get noticed, right? That's weird.
It was a gimmick, yeah.
Yeah, like,
That's
you know?
a great point. And it worked for the very brief period of time that people, you know, cared about them. They had one big album, and one big song from it that I happen to really like is known as Personality Crisis, which, by the way, Quinn, you're going to definitely hear where the punk influence here.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right?
But now I'm starting to hear a little Twisted Sister. Which is interesting. We're getting warmer.
In my mind, Twisted Sister was a takeoff of the Dolls.
Well, yeah, but it's not even just that. This sounds like we're closer to them.
You think it sounds a little like Twisted Sister?
Yeah,
a little bit. Yeah,
we're not
a little bit. Now, glam as a fashion, the glam rock, that crossed over into even non-glam rock acts like Iggy and the Stooges. Elton John did like a whole glam look.
You also have to remember the times. It was like the sexual revolution, and people were just doing things. Like,
correct.
Right?
Totally agree with you. One band that was doing things was Kiss.
Yeah.
And in 1975, they released probably maybe their most popular song. Before we listen to that one, though, Kiss, Quinn, much like the New York Dolls.
This goes all in Kiss. Kiss to me is like, okay, we're here now. This is a little heavy metal. It's a little
hard
glam rock. It's a little
glam.
hard. But Kiss was also designed for the mainstream. These guys were smart.
Gene Simmons, CNBC.
Yes, very smart.
Very smart.
Very smart, right? Like they knew what they were doing, right? It's like, we're going to have costumes, we're going to have face paint and all this and silly hair.
Yeah.
And like, but here's the thing, but each one of them would be like a different character. So like their costume would be like different-ish.
Yes.
And then we could sell like action figures and shit of this.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
And the thing about Kiss, most people, let me rephrase
there was
that.
like lore.
There's lore.
Like that, and not even factual lore. Like just they're from space or something. I don't know.
Or something. It's possible. Yeah. They're a polarizing band in the sense that some people love Kiss and some people absolutely cannot stand Kiss.
Well, I think
I'm indifferent.
Here's
personally.
the thing about Kiss. I feel like for rock and roll, they're like the antithesis of Rebels, right? This is pure commercialism, what it is. Right?
Even though they have an image that's designed to be like shocking and funny, or
but the fact that they're in like these special costumes with distinct personalities, they're almost just a boy band, just weird, right? Like, you know what I mean? Essentially,
I mean,
like, you know, they're just like this weird interdimensional boy band of some kind.
Interdimensional boy band, yes.
Because of I just mean by a boy band's characterized by characters, quite literally, right? Where
yes.
each one, you know, somebody like is a fan of that one,
and the cute one, the mean one, the nice one. This is all real,
right? But with Kiss, you got the one that looks like a cat or some shit. Like there's all these like different versions.
Which one is the cat? Is that
it's the one that wears the big boots and he has like the shield,
Frehley,
like the Green Ranger shield, practically. Like there's all these like different ones in Kiss.
Peter Criss, yeah. Anyway, their most popular song, Maybe, is Rock and Roll All Night. This is actually the original non-live version from 1975. I'm playing this to give you an idea of where their sound was at in 1975 and how this, even though Kiss wasn't technically a hair metal band, right? No one really thinks of them as that.
Well, later they were.
They later
with the no makeup.
With the no makeup, they actually were. You're right. They were instrumental in this scene in some way, shape, or form. Take a listen to the original Rock and Roll All Night, 1975. Crunchy guitar sound.
This sounds like it, Joe. I mean,
this is a pop song too.
I do feel like Kiss is the connector, the one, if you will.
They're one of the connectors.
Yeah,
and maybe they're not talked about as one, but in my opinion,
the strongest connector to me.
Well, because they combine all the elements, right?
They got all of it.
The theatrics, the pop sensibility.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't know this chorus, if nothing else, right?
Yeah, it's glam, but it's also just weird.
Yeah.
Like, it's just the look, I mean, and everything.
It's not too hard to be, like, accessible.
Right.
Right? It's like crunchy rock, but it's not like...
And that's the thing, too, is, like, again, how we're talking about how they have this, like, weird costume persona and all this shit. But at the same time, it's like their music is the most mainstream-ass, mainstream stuff. Like
they knew what they were doing,
you know,
like you said.
That's all I mean by it. It's like it's just a funny thing. It's a mishmash of a bunch of stuff.
Agreed. Another band that really kicked it up a notch when it came to this scene. Again, even though they predate it like Kiss, they predate the glam metal scene.
Right.
Was Van Halen.
Yes.
100%. Because, you know, they're variously described as hard rock. Some people say metal. I don't find them to be metal, even if you want to say glam metal. They're a hard rock band.
Okay, so now we're into the Van Halen stuff.
Good, I love them.
Here's the thing: is I think Van Halen.
What are they?
They are absolutely part of that scene because they're right. You know, obviously, I know the first album was what 79 or 80
78.
78.
Yep.
But I mean, when they started to really break through, I think they were lumped into this hair metal.
I would say.
Like as far as the mainstream viewed them as,
I would say if you look at what hair metal became, right, in the mid '80s and stuff, in the late '80s, as far as the lead singer prototype and the lead guitarist prototype, they tick both those boxes with David Lee Roth or Sammy, I guess, but mainly David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen. They have the big fat drum sound. They have the theatrics. They have the attitude.
Hair.
They have the hair.
It is an important factor.
It is
the hair factor.
It is a key element, Quinn. Yeah. Yes, the hair factor. But they also have the subject matter, the personality, the energy. Because that's another thing.
I mean, they got stuff like "Hot for Teacher," where it's just strictly like just sexual stuff.
A lot of the things that maybe I failed to mention this at the beginning, but a lot of the point of rock and roll, even in the 50s, throughout all of this, is sex.
Correct,
A lot
but-
of the subject matter, implicitly or not, is sex.
But here's the thing: is Van Halen had the benefit of music videos where they could really push the envelope with the sex stuff, right?
That's a good
They
point.
just have strippers, just like literal, actual strippers, just on your music videos.
Yeah, why the hell not?
Because we can, of course.
Now, in 1978, they did release their first album, and here's a brief snippet of Runnin' with the Devil, playing this one again to give you an idea of the sound that was coming to be during this period of time.
So you don't. Let me ask you a question as
Go
we're
ahead.
listening to this.
Yeah.
You don't consider this full-on hair metal because to me we're there.
I think retrospectively it's easy to term it in that way.
Yeah.
I don't know that they... I like listening to this screeching.
Yeah.
I don't know that they... I never thought of them as hair metal. I really like Van Halen. I'm a big Van Halen fan. I never really consider them that, but I guess they are, right?
Yeah.
To me, they never felt like a hair metal
You know
band.
what's a band that I always felt was like leaning towards being that?
What?
It might sound stupid because their songs are all over the place, but their look.
Who's that?
Queen.
Oh yeah, Queen has definitely dabbled in the glam rock scene.
Yeah,
definitely.
Like, especially the tall guy with the big hair.
Brian May, the lead
Yeah,
guitarist.
yeah.
Well, again, Freddie, the singer, Brian May, the guitarist. Like,
Right. It's just that their music was not like metally. It was like bicycle, or like
They-
Bohemian Rhapsody, or like
They had some hard rock and shit though. It just
but
wasn't
then-
as popular.
Then they got Pretty Little Thing Called Love's like a 50s song.
That's an
like-
Elvis tribute, yeah.
I just mean it's like
All
Queen,
over.
Queen, their specialty was to be every
Yeah.
song was totally different,
Yeah.
right? But as far as their look was concerned, I feel like they could have
They had
been
a glam look.
They had like like a hair look.
Yeah.
you know.
Freddie used to have the
always
long
had
hair.
Freddie did, but
In
he
the
was
70s.
notably had his short hair. But the rest of them had pretty big hair.
Yeah, Brian May had a huge mane
And
of
then
hair.
once they all dressed up like ladies in that music video, remember they were like little old ladies or
Yes,
something, and they one of them was like cleaning a house and like all this.
Yes, I know. Another band, honorable mention here, we don't have to play anything from, is Aerosmith, because they had started in the very early 70s, more of like a blues hard rock band.
Right.
And they remained that way. You know, they're very unique too. Aerosmith is another great band, again with the Steven Tyler dynamic with Joe Perry. Is that his name? I think it is. I hope it is.
Hey everyone, look! The Chooch got something right.
I've heard people sometimes lump Aerosmith, especially 80s Aerosmith, into this.
80s Aerosmith glammed it up.
Yeah.
Because they were some of these established bands simply
They just transformed.
They tweaked a few things because it was popular to do so. But I think Aerosmith's another one where they definitely were around before this was even a thing. You know what I mean?
Aerosmith was around before time existed or whatever.
Apparently so.
Still going.
Still going. So just a shout out to Aerosmith.
I think T-Rex and Aerosmith shared the same environment. You know, and I'm talking about the real
See
T-Rex.
what you did there, Quinn. So we've covered so far the hard rock, the origins, the seedlings of heavy metal with Zeppelin and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath. We've talked about glam rock, right? And how it got harder, and we're starting to see it. But we do need to mention, back in the UK, there was a new wave of British heavy metal, that's the name of the movement, in the late 70s, right around the same time that we're talking about with Van Halen. The big one in my mind that kicked that off, or was a huge part of it, was Judas Priest. Now, Judas Priest is a much more conventional heavy metal band. Again, I don't want to get into debates with people about this, but they're not a hair metal band. Let me just put it. Judas Priest is not a hair metal band typically. However, in 1980, they released probably what I would say is their most radio-friendly song, and that would be, I love this one, Living After Midnight. Let's take a listen to Judas Priest from British Steel, Living After Midnight. This is a pop song, and in the best friggin' way. I love this song. So, for those of you that have never really listened to Priest, the rest of their catalog does not all sound like this, but this is a good template for what could be a radio hit in terms of metal. I just love this song. So this showed in 1980 that there was an appetite for this on the radio, because this was actually a crossover hit, which metal hadn't had too many of those yet.
This totally falls into
right.
Yeah,
like this could be a mid-80s song.
It sounds like it.
You know what I mean? And again, Judas Priest does not all their songs sound like this, but
there's some intersecting stuff going on here too that's coming to my mind. the 70s is like this period of time with all of this. Like, I definitely think like The Who has something to do with this, right? And like the Rolling Stones to a certain extent, right?
The Who and the Stones, especially in the 70s, really had a harder sound than they had in the 60s because it's just not what you did in the 60s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Particularly The Who, but also the Stones, but by the later 70s, had a much harder sound.
Right. That's why I just want to give them, like, in case people are screaming at home, what about them?
Yeah.
Right? Because, and why I bring them up too is because in the mid 70s they were like arena bands, right?
Yes.
They were huge.
The Who and the Stones.
Yeah,
both
like
were.
they had because they were established at this point. People knew who they were.
Yep.
But their music kind of feeds into this as we form into the true.
Oh, The Who are a very influential
The Who,
band.
definitely.
Very influential. And both of these bands that you just mentioned is just funny, coincidentally. They have that lead singer, lead guitarist, 1-2 dynamic, Jagger and Richards, and Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend. It's just funny.
Yeah.
You know?
It feels like you just have to mention them, right?
At least
because
a tip of the cap.
they're definitely like a huge influence on this.
So we're talking about the new wave of British heavy metal. We have Judas Priest. There was also obviously Iron Maiden, the other big one. But another one that actually grew out of the new wave of British heavy metal scene was Def Leppard.
Yes. Okay. Now, Def Leppard, they're the thing. They're definitely it.
So Def Leppard hates that they were lumped in with the whole hair metal scene.
That they had hair.
Now, they
It
did
was
have hair,
metal-y.
and they played metal music.
Yes.
And they did, after their first few albums, start to adopt the more commercial, radio-friendly sound.
If you want to make money back then.
Well, that's what you did.
Yeah.
You guys know Def Leppard. Pour Some Sugar on Me, you know, Photograph That. They had like 10 songs that were popular in a very short amount of time. But Def Leppard was British.
And what the fuck is wrong with that, mate?
And why am I mentioning that?
Want some fish and chips?
Because the glam metal scene, when people came to define it in the 80s, it was really centered around Los Angeles, particularly the Sunset Strip, and that whole culture. And we're going to talk about some of those bands shortly. But Def Leppard, whether they kicking and screaming or not, they were labeled hair metal.
Right.
Because they were like, oh, fuck it, we're in England. We have nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
But sorry, you sound like you do.
Yeah.
You know, like Pour Some Sugar on Me sounds like it could have been made in Los Angeles.
Pour Some Sugar on Me is like one of the songs of the time. Like,
Right.
it's like known. It's like connected.
Yeah, exactly. Also, a brief mention to Europe, because they had the Final Countdown, and in general, Europe is a cool band and kind of a glamish band.
The Final Countdown is a fantastic song that can be used in many settings,
Yes.
including professional wrestling.
Absolutely.
And it's awesome.
Absolutely. So we've named a lot of bands so far, right? And what we essentially have, it's a wide spate of bands that had this in common, at least. Hard rock.
Yeah.
Flashy, bordering on metal a little bit.
Commercially viable.
Exactly. There was
Yeah.
always that pop sensibility. Occasional blues rock influence, but that was starting to be stripped away. It was more just like chord progressions, pop, guitar solos. So no matter how disparate Van Halen is from Kiss or whoever, right? They all have this general, like, I don't know, is it just in the zeitgeist? You know, is it just
it's in the geist. All right.
The gestalt, if you will, of what became the hair metal scene.
Shut up.
By the early 80s, the term that was being used for this type of music, including Van Halen, including Def Leppard, was pop metal. Hair metal was later. That term did not come around until the early 90s.
I think that's more of an outgrowth of just the things people were seeing on MTV.
100%.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, they all have big, gigantic hair, and the music's like hard rock.
Yeah, it's hair metal.
It's
right?
hair metal.
But it was really known as pop metal for the most part. So some other major players here in this scene would be Quiet Riot. Now, they were formed in 1973, but their success was during the hair metal scene of the 80s. Most notably, Come On, Feel the Noise.
Yes.
You know that one, right?
Well, especially if you saw the ad for Monsters of Rock 100 times with the guy falling out of the plane. Like,
so I think we should just play that just so
thing going on with this stuff as it started. To us now, it sounds like just regular old music,
Yes.
right? But to people who were not ready for it, maybe they were into a little bit of a lighter sound,
like Frampton or
It
something.
just sounded like screaming to them.
Right.
they couldn't even hear the rhythm to it. It just sounded like noise to these people.
Which is ironic because the name of the song is, of course, Come on, Feel the Noise.
Which, how much you want to bet is a takeoff of that, right? It's because that was the common, trope, is that the old man saying, "What is this noise?"
Oh, as far back as the 50s with rock and roll, because these are all jazz fans from the Greatest Generation and big band.
It funnier is that it's the people coming from the rock and roll age.
It is
hearing this and being like, "What is this noise?"
You're right.
It's like this is gross. Like this isn't even anything.
It's funny too. This is a cover of a band named Slade, by the way, which maybe some people didn't know that. They also spell "come" in a very unsavory way,
well,
Quinn. Which,
I mean,
sex. Anyway, you ever hear of "Round and Round" by Rat?
Yes.
That's a good one. They were formed in 1976, also were very popular in the 80s. Round and Round was from 1984. And why don't we just play a little bit of the chorus here for you, okay? This is Round and Round by Rat. Van Halen-style guitars.
It's the same thing.
If I told you this is Quiet Riot, would you know?
Nobody. I think if you told me it was Rat, I wouldn't. I'd be like, what? Who are they?
Classic song, though, right?
Yeah.
We're giving you a sampler here, folks. There are more bands than we can cover. There are more songs that we can mention, but we've mentioned these guys enough already. Let's just play a song by them. This is Twisted Sister, one of the ugly faces of this whole movement.
One of the ones, right? It was one of the ones that people were like, "Oh, that's heavy metal."
That's right. Now, they'd had two big songs, "I Wanna Rock" and "We're Not Gonna Take It." Both were 1984. Why don't we just play "I Wanna Rock"? Change it up.
You know what I think's funny about Twisted Sister?
What?
Is that they're so controversial or whatever because they're dressed like girls. When they're dressed, they just wear men's clothes and they have rouge on or something.
Yeah.
Maybe a wig.
Maybe a wig. I don't even think they do have wigs.
It's they don't even look too female. It's clearly a man with makeup on.
People were very upset about it back then, though.
It's just funny because there was worse, right?
And I think
even Kiss to a certain extent.
Kiss looks like idiots.
Yeah, but these guys, this is horrible.
Oh no!
It's oh no, he put a little rouge on his face, has a wig on. But he's wearing leather, it looks like a biker.
Remember when he had to Joe Lieberman got mad at them or somebody did in Dee Snider?
I really think it's just because Dee Snider was just loud and political.
Yeah, and they had two popular songs.
Yeah, and he was just because he was political. His adversaries were political people.
That's a good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, actually, it was Tipper Gore that had a problem with it wasn't Joe Lieberman.
Motley Crue came up in 1981.
Yes.
They are considered by some people that care about this more than I do as the
Motley Crue. I mean,
just look at them.
It's just in the name.
Look at Vince Neil and Tommy Lee. But anyway, they're considered the first true glam metal band by certain people because they were on that sleazy Sunset Strip. Mm-hmm. They were living the lifestyle that they sang about in their songs. Kiss is from Detroit. You know what I mean? A lot of these other bands are from England.
They're imitating. They're not really living this whatever this is.
Motley Crue was right there on the Strip, man. And their first album was 1981, but their most famous song, I think, well, maybe not, but to me is Girls, Girls, Girls from 87. You know the one, right? We're not even going to play it. You guys know the song. Maybe it's playing under us. There was also Great White. You ever hear of them?
I've heard of them. I couldn't identify a song, though. Maybe you'd probably play something and I'll be like, oh, that.
So they did a cover. Yes, I'm going to play it for you. They did a cover in 1989 of an Ian Hunter song from the 70s, 1973. It's called Once Bitten, Twice Shy. Do you remember this one? I think it sounds like you will.
Yes, I know this song.
This is Great White's cover. This is a song this came out in 89. It's already a 16-year-old song.
Interesting.
Yeah. But the chorus is so catchy.
Yeah. Now this is funny because this is late 80s.
Yes, 89.
It sounds lighter.
It is. It's very pleasant, isn't it?
It sounds like something that would play on Dave's World.
Don't bring up Dave's World again.
Well, because I just
2 weeks in a row.
I always just think of Dave's World as this weird, late 80s dad into the 90s doing things.
Oh man, I don't want to think about Dave's World ever. Enough already.
Can't wait for the Dave's World episode. Yeah. Just specifically Dave's World
coming soon to a podcast near you.
Yeah,
and then of course we'd be remiss if we did not mention Bon Jovi.
Yes.
A codifier of the hair metal genre.
New Jersey legend.
The New Jersey legend himself, John Bon Jovi, who dated my aunt in high school. Just need to mention that.
I just find everyone knows this guy. We live here. Everyone has a story. Oh, I went to high school with him, or this or that. Like it's like everybody that is his age somehow knew the man before he was anything. Like it's like every single person who's his age is like, oh yeah, we went to we knew him.
We used to hang out with him.
Oh, we used to go bowling every week.
Or whatever,
like, it's always like some weird story of like regular stuff.
I know, it's good.
Yeah.
So Bon Jovi, although they're not a Sunset Strip band, they're completely opposite coast over here. They're hanging out with Southside Johnny, for crying out loud. You know that. Oof, hi Ian. Their hair and their style.
Had good hair.
They had John Bon Jovi had phenomenal hair.
Glorious
in the mid-80s.
hair.
Right?
Yes.
And then again,
it's almost a shame that when we got to the 90s, they all cut it short.
Yeah, he had the short hair when he did It's My Life and all that.
Yeah.
But lead singer John Bon Jovi, his right-hand man, Richie Sambora, the same fucking formula that I keep talking about. All of these lead guitarists, by the way, I don't want to say all, but all of them, they all do the big flashy solo that like Eddie Van Halen, who was really inspired by other people, but Eddie really brought to the forefront.
What is the deal with these guys always having like the double guitar and
a double neck,
sometimes a keytar and like all sorts of nonsense? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's part of this that we haven't discussed is this like silly instruments like that would plague this genre. Like,
that's true. The double neck guitar, I guess it is practical for certain sounds.
I understand.
You look like a moron.
Why you would need it, but I feel like it existed more for just to be extreme, right? It was
I
like,
think so.
It was just, look at this shit, like like look at this crazy ass stuff.
Well, some of that is again same thing with the drum kit you were talking about. Some of it is for show.
7,000 drums. Like, are you even using all of that?
One of my favorites is Michael Anthony from Van Halen had the Jack Daniels bass.
There you go.
For no fucking reason, just because he can.
For marketing.
Yeah, exactly, for marketing.
A lot of it was for marketing. Like, it's like, wow, he must be really good. He's playing two guitars at once or something. Like,
what a man. Let's give him more money. But Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, which came out in '86, right smack dab in the popularity here. They had multiple hits, obviously, but You Give Love a Bad Name and Living on a Prayer, those are some glam metal classics, man. Absolutely. We don't need to play them. But anyway, we've covered up to the mid-'80s right now. We threw in a little Great White for fun. We got a few more bands to mention, and we got to talk about what happens with the scene. It's very popular now. We're in the MTV age in the 1980s. It's caught on. We mentioned all these songs. It's just a small amount that we mentioned. So many bands are popular that had never been. Some were formed in the early 70s, had never seen commercial success until this movement. So there's a lot going on. It's permeating the fashion and the culture. Look at 80s pictures. You'll see it everywhere. Yeah. But folks, thank you for hanging in with us here. We're going to talk all about the other half of glam metal right here when more Acid Wash Memories returns.
My name is Dee Snider, that's S-N-I-D-E-R. I have been asked to come here to present my views on, quote, the subject of the content of certain sound recordings and suggestions that recording packages be labeled to provide a warning to prospective purchasers of sexually explicit or other potentially offensive content, unquote. Before I get into that, I'd like to tell the committee a little bit about myself. I'm 30 years old. I'm married. I have a 3-year-old son. I was born and raised a Christian, and I still adhere to those principles. Believe it or not, I do not drink, I do not smoke, and I do not do drugs. I do play in and write the songs for a rock and roll band named Twisted Sister that is classified as heavy metal, and I pride myself on writing songs that are consistent with my above-mentioned beliefs.
Do you know me? You may not recognize me without my hair. I'm Cy Sperling, Hair Club's first client. And since 1968, I've helped thousands of men with thinning hair. If you have thinning hair, this booklet is something you should have. It covers transplants, weaving, fusion, minoxidil, and proper hair care. So call our toll-free number now to get your free booklet. You saw the difference it made for me, and look what it did for our clients. So call our toll-free number now to get your free booklet.
Now there's a new taste in town. Wendy's new chili. And it's just 99 cents. Thicker, zestier, tastier. Wendy's new chili. 99 cents now.
Hello, we're Whitesnake. Take control of your destiny and register to vote now. The reward will come from your choice. If you're over 18, do something cool. Vote. It's not a duty, it's a privilege.
And now we return to more acid-washed memories.
Hey, welcome back to Acid Wash Memories, our special hair metal episode.
Very
Episode
special.
39, very special. Joe Murata and Michael Quinn. How you doing there, Michael?
Hi.
My lead guitarist, if you will. Thank you guys for being with us here on Acid Wash Memories. I hope you're liking this one. Again, we're not trying to offend anybody's musical sensibility by mislabeling. We're trying to do broad strokes here because, believe it or not, some of our audience is younger than we are, and we're just trying to lay the foundation, bring up some memories, and help you guys have a good time, whatever you're doing today. So that's all. Please follow us on Twitter at AWM Podcast. Join our group.
It's on X, too.
Yeah, God, yeah, X. Yeah. X or whatever. Just whatever. Just follow us on it. And leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. We'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Wouldn't we? I would.
We would.
You would also?
I like it.
Okay, it's good. And you like hair metal, too, right? We've discussed.
Fan. Yes.
Fan. Okay.
Fan.
So we were talking about the scene a little bit, the
it was a
Sunset-
scene, all right.
It's all a scene. That's intentional. The Sunset Strip, Los Angeles, the Whiskey A Go Go, all these other clubs, the whole scene is doused in booze, drugs, women, the party atmosphere. That's the ethos of this scene,
So
right?
I think you need to talk about that a little bit because I think that's what made the candle burn bright but burn out quick. Was a lot of these.
Did you write that down ahead of time? That was good, Quinn.
No, it's from Blade Runner. Ever see it?
Oh, I've seen it.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
These guys were living hard. A lot of them.
Yes.
I want to say for a second here. I wonder how much that contributed to burning out so quick.
I'm not a doctor, but I can't imagine a steady diet of mounds of cocaine and
pills, drug
brown liquor, white liquor,
any kind of
green liquor.
Yeah,
I can't imagine it's good for you.
Right. These guys, when this scene got going and it started rolling, I mean, these guys lived a party every day for an entire decade.
The real ones did.
Right.
Motley Crue and the not the posers like Dee Snider.
I would like to use this occasion to speak on a more personal note and show just how unfair the whole concept of lyrical interpretation and judgment can be.
It was not healthy, and they had a reputation.
Oh, God, they did.
They interview these guys, and you didn't get an interview without them having cigarettes in hand and look with the sunglasses on because who knows what the hell they were doing before, and barely being able to talk.
That's a great point. Penelope Spheeris made a movie, trilogy, The Decline of Western Civilization, and part 2 is The Metal Years. It was made in 1988, and there is a scene where Chris Holmes of Wasp, who was one of the bands there, he's in his pool drinking vodka on a float while his mom watches, and he's just drunk. And this is seen as a prime example of the decadence of this scene.
Mom, have a drink.
Chris, do you
Yes,
drink
ma'am.
This is a documentary.
Pardon?
Do you
Really?
drink very much?
The quality is high
yes,
for
I do.
looks like a
I'm
movie.
a full-blown
Shot
alcoholic.
on film.
Just when he's awake.
It's just not.
I drink too much.
It's not a good scene. Now,
Yeah.
this movie is very good and very funny, by the way, and everyone is interviewed in it. I'm talking about Poison, all the bands. Alice Cooper, Lemmy is in it from Motorhead.
I know that all the girls in the audience are going to want to know this.
16 inches. Okay.
No! No!
Combination all four. We're four piece.
By the way, Penelope Spheeris went on to direct Wayne's World, so there you go. But
as somebody who was really into
she knew the scene, man.
the scene and these people, and so.
But you have a point about the decadence, Quinn.
The decadence, to me, feeds into the decline.
I totally agree. It really started to wear thin with people.
It couldn't last
by the
because
end of the
even
80s.
they're human beings.
Well, that's
right.
true,
That's
too.
the other thing, right? And not a lot of people were willing to live that life. Even it looked cool on a music video, but then if you went to go live it, I don't know, you became a junkie or something.
Yeah, it could be very difficult.
Yeah.
Another movie, it came out prior to the one we just mentioned, but it definitely lampooned rather harshly the metal scene, not specifically hair metal, but the metal scene. Obviously, would be This Is Spinal Tap.
Right.
in
So Spinal
1984.
Tap's another,
Oh, God, I love that movie.
great movie. Rob Reiner.
Rob Reiner.
Rob Reiner, yeah,
Yeah.
Michael from
The
from
Meathead
All in the
himself, yeah.
Meathead himself from All in the Family.
Yep.
He has decided to become a director, and he's going to follow a metal band, and it's like a faux documentary.
It's so good,
Like
man.
it's a fake metal
A
band.
mockumentary.
Yeah, mockumentary, and just all sorts of dumb shit happens like the whole way through.
But it's so accurate. The way
Yeah.
they started as a 60s band, they had their Flower Child
yeah,
era,
there's that
and-
little background
Yeah,
piece
it's
at the
so
beginning,
good.
and it's just like
They always have a different drummer. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Just every little, but these things.
The stupid instruments.
Yes, the stupid
Stonehenge.
the whole the arena shows with the stupid crap like the theatrics and everything.
These go to 11.
So, but this to me again, it just plays into like this shit was not going to make it. You know,
Right. Not
it's
forever.
not going to make it. Like.
Very
You
good,
know?
Quinn. No, but you're right. It wasn't. It was a shit sandwich, if you
Yeah.
will.
The review you had on Shark Sandwich, which was merely a 2-word review, just said shit sandwich.
Where'd they print that? Where'd they print that? That's not real, is it? You can't print that.
But back to the glam metal scene. It was all the rage. It was so popular. Again, Quinn and I remember it still being popular when we were growing up.
Yeah.
And then it
was
faded.
a cash register.
It was a cash register. All you had to... So this is the great thing. If you're in a musical scene that is defined by image, it's very easy to cash in. The punk movement in the late 70s, they did that, and again in the 90s, obviously. But in the metal scene, they do it too. Oh, I just got to look the part. It doesn't matter if we're any good or not, or if this is what we really think.
'Cause there was
you know?
a bunch of like, wasn't there a bunch of just metal bands or whatever that were like nobody ever heard of on
Yeah,
top of all this?
of course there were.
But they were making some kind of money somewhere.
Yeah.
And they got to do all the drugs and have all the fun.
Well, that's the thing. And even like the established hard rock bands started to integrate the image to their advantage. We mentioned that earlier, like Aerosmith. They were already popular, but they said, fuck it, we want to be popular again.
Right.
Let's glam it up. Another band that cashed in on this, cha-ching, was Whitesnake. Because Whitesnake, you might only know them from, I guess, Here I Go Again on My Own is probably their most famous song, but they have others, Still of the Night. They started in the late 70s. David Coverdale was the singer briefly for Deep Purple. And then he left Deep Purple and formed Whitesnake, and early Whitesnake sounds nothing like Here I Go Again or anything like that.
If you want love, you gotta be cool. And if you deny it, then baby, you're a fool.
But they saw he was smart, and he was like, okay, I'm going to just, we're going to tease the hair more, and we're going to go for this commercial sound.
I mean, I think we're at the chapter here where people are coming onto the scene that were not established people that were just kind of going with it, right? Because it was, like we said, cash register. It's easy money. Make a little tweak to your sound.
And
have
your
a
image.
stupid costume on,
Yep.
and the people give you millions of dollars.
Hey, why the hell not, right?
And you can keep your career going, too, on top of it.
And that's why we're here to announce that Quinn and I will actually be forming a hair metal band.
Yes.
Next year, 2024.
It's going to take us a year to grow our hair out.
Yeah, that's why we have to do this properly.
Don't cut your hair, Joe.
No, like Pavement said.
Yeah.
And we're going to go. No, that is cut your hair. And we're going to move. Actually, we're moving to LA, Sunset Strip. We're going to experience this for ourselves,
right?
And really do this properly, right?
Lots of alcohol.
Oh yeah,
lots of drugs.
Just mountains of cocaine.
Yeah.
We're not serious, folks. So there's other hits. I'm not going to play the clips anymore. We've had enough clips. White Lion had When the Children Cry in 1987. Warrant had Cherry Pie.
Yeah.
You know that one.
She's my cherry pie. Yeah, that.
You want to take a stab at when that came out?
84, 5, something like that.
1990.
Really?
Yeah, it's one of the latter era hits for the hair metal scene.
Interesting.
1990. What about 17 by Winger? You know that one? Only 17.
87.
89.
Man, it's all at the end, isn't it?
Yeah, some of them
The ones that were like recognizable in the like if you just list the Monsters of Rock.
Oh, which don't worry, we will.
To me, that is like you know why I always bring it up is because that was like on all the freaking time in the 90s, and that to me typified hair metal.
Oh God, yeah,
Like, it was
Monster
like-
Ballads and Monsters of Rock.
It was this compilation cheap ass thing from probably some stupid.
Was it even
company.
Time Life, or was it like
It's
somebody?
probably one of those companies
Yeah.
like to just like we just got a bunch of this. We own the rights to this shit. Let's just like unload it, right? I
like
just play it during like every single like thing on cable.
That's what they did, man.
Monsters of Rock. 35 huge hits on 2 CDs and 2 cassettes.
A couple of bands that came up in the late 80s that were very popular, Skid Row and Poison
Yeah, definitely heard of Poison.
Poison, Bret Michaels, all that. To me, that is one of the, when I, as a kid and like to this day, when I think hair metal, I think Poison. I don't even like Poison, to be honest with you. I really don't.
Poison could probably hang out with Bebop and Rocksteady, and like
What?
like they're that kind of like
What
I don't know.
does that mean?
It means they're like the rough. They kind of had this look to them, right?
Yeah, the Bret Michaels wore the makeups.
Yeah,
and then bandana and all that.
I don't know. They just remind me of that.
Well, they ain't nothing but a good time. That was one of their big songs, and of course, Every Rose Has Its Thorn, which we'll get back to, but. That was a power ballad. I guess we got to talk about power ballads.
So yeah, I think it's an important aspect of this scene, right? Because
the power
they would
ballad.
always have they have their we're so hard, blah blah, like that, and then like it would like have this like ballad, but with their kind of like twist on it, right?
Yes.
And
the lead singer would be singing nicely the one time.
Like it's like, oh, he's got a softer side, right? It's like, this one's for the ladies or whatever. It's like shit like that, right?
Yes, and the power ballad.
It's part of the marketing too. There's no way they didn't factor this in, right?
They knew.
They absolutely were like, they're in these concerts that everyone's on drugs and it's a real rager, right, man?
Play
and
this towards the end.
Play this towards the end when everyone's kind of really burning out, and then you have the women that came along for this shit, and they're like, oh, he is a nice man.
Let
or
me
whatever.
take my underwear off and throw it at him, or whatever the hell people do.
Yeah.
But yeah, these became very cliched, and if you've never heard of
they all had them, it was insane.
All had them. If you've never heard of a power ballad, I'll explain it to you. At least one per album, usually, right? The metal-ish band, like Quinn said, this is for the ladies. We're going to take it down a little bit, right? It might have a piano.
Yeah.
Very, very important.
It's usually like way classed up compared to like what they usually do.
Right. And then like you have the tender singing, then there's like a crescendo, and then there's a big chorus.
Yeah.
Then
where they get a little louder than they all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is who this is, right?
And then either after the first or second chorus, there's the big dopey guitar solo.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. I always think of like Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
Like that, like or something like that.
Guns N' Roses, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to. Guns N' Roses, November Rain would definitely be a power ballad, by the way.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you consider it a
November
power
Rain?
ballad?
Absolutely. Guns N' Roses, I don't consider a hair metal band because their sound was a little bit harder, edgier. It had elements of punk a little bit. It was not what you were getting in the mid 80s. It was a little bit different.
But that's what made them stand out.
Yes.
But it's
That's
not
exactly
to say
what did.
that is not to say that they were not lumped by the mainstream media as no, they're part of that.
I mean, and they did.
They
did the power ballads.
Also, just their name alone, Guns N' Roses.
Oh, that Axl.
Yeah.
Oh, Guns N' Roses, okay, that Axl.
Yeah, Axl Rose.
Good.
Yeah, like
I
really.
love them, man. I love Guns N' Roses early
Slash.
stuff. Again, the lead singer guitarist combo that we were talking about.
Again,
though.
Axl Rose and Slash sound like they could be in Streets of Rage
Or Turtles too.
Yeah, they're that.
There is a Slash in the Turtles actually, and Axl in Streets of Rage.
Yeah.
That Axl.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure we mention them. Even though I don't consider Sweet Child of Mine or Welcome to the Jungle or any of that to be hair metal.
Here's the thing. They come near the end.
Well,
in the time frame of
towards
all of this,
the end,
right?
Yes.
And I do think I'm not blaming them for the decline or anything, but like
it's not Axl's fault.
I do think their loss of prominence kind of goes hand in hand with this entire genre going down.
I don't know if it's
because
it has to do with the other, though. I think it's just coincidental. No,
but from a mainstream perspective, they were one of the faces of this, even though they weren't. Does that make sense?
I think you're right in the sense that at the time hair metal lost its popularity, Guns N' Roses also did.
Right, but I
don't know if they're the cause or the effect.
I do think non-fans of this music, right? People who liked other music,
like what,
who view
reggae,
or even just the mainstream
jazz
hits of the time, like
UB40.
a Madonna or whatever,
right?
Like a Michael Jackson, or
like a Michael Jackson,
right? Like those people the outside looking in, right? Those people absolutely saw Guns N' Roses as a face of this.
Probably, I think that's fair.
You know what I'm saying?
I think that's fair. Yeah, I do. I do agree with you there.
Yeah. And the people viewing Guns N' Roses, by the way, are the same people listening to Michael Bolton and shit.
He was very popular for a period of time.
Very great artist. He had good shit.
I didn't say that, but I guess you're all right. It's all right.
Michael Bolton?
That's me.
Wow, is that your real name?
Yeah.
So are you related to that singer guy?
No, it's just a coincidence.
But okay, I want to make something very clear here. Although this is very popular music throughout 84 to 90, 91, other music exists. We're not dumb here.
Absolutely.
You have the new wave and post-punk scene in the early 80s,
Yes.
right? Which I know you're legitimately a big fan of.
Big fan, yeah.
You had the indie rock scene was starting up with bands like The Replacements and R.E.M.
Yes.
In the mid and late 80s. There was also an almost defied being in one particular scene. They were punk, they were funk, they were rock. Of course, I'm talking about the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Right.
They started in 83, 84, but they really picked up steam in 89 and then in the early 90s, right around this time.
The 90s, really, they picked up. They became a super band.
Right, so they avoided this whole scene and ever being lumped in it. You know what I mean? They weren't, so good for them.
What about Pearl Jam?
Well, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, U2.
Yeah.
The rock bands is why I'm mentioning them that did not sound like the rock you heard on the radio.
Right.
Right, like Pearl Jam out of Seattle, I believe they are, right?
I think the term for them at the time was alternative. They were not metal.
They were an alternative to the mainstream.
Yeah, they were not considered the same. This is not the same rock.
No, it's a different kind of rock.
Yeah.
Right?
It's rock, but it's not that rock.
Alice in Chains always got labeled in with Pearl Jam and Nirvana. Alice in Chains pretty much sounds nothing like Pearl Jam or Nirvana, but just want to mention that here. But Nirvana is the biggest elephant in the room here.
They're the catalyst to the end of metal.
They're helpful. I don't think they... You know what it is with hair metal, Quinn?
What?
It's death by 1,000 cuts.
Right, but
It's not one big thing that happened.
But I think this was the last cut. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, maybe.
I will take that metaphor, sir.
Does that make sense?
Very
It's
good.
like they already were kind of reeling. It's like all these guys are on drugs. The music's is kind of the same. It's like it's been going on for a while.
Yeah.
Like there needed something to happen, right?
The thing is, too, is like Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Soundgarden, all these bands, it could have been any of them that broke through first with a big #1 single and video.
Right.
It could have been.
Yeah.
And I like Nirvana. I don't love Nirvana.
I think the video contributes to this. The Nirvana Smells Like Teen Spirit video. The song is a great song, and it probably was charting on the radio anyway. But the video has this vibe of like a wasteland, like this screwed up high school.
Dystopian almost.
Dystopian, like
1984.
and it was totally like new. It was foreign. This like what they were doing in here, right? Had like a Mad Max kind of thing going on.
A little bit.
Maybe even a Blade Runner thing if you want to go dystopian, right? It's like just this
go.
weird, like seemed like this alternate future of some kind, right? Where like these guys are just kind of rejects.
It was, rejects. It was grim.
Right.
Whereas all the hair metal...
It was glam.
It was glam.
Yeah.
There you go. It was positive. A lot of this music, despite some of the subject matter and the arrogance of the bands...
It was about having a good time.
Exactly. Like Poison said, ain't nothing but a good time.
Yeah.
This was like, no, this fucking sucks.
Yeah. It's like our future's going to be terrible.
Right.
Everything sucks.
Right.
Like,
Very happy music.
Yeah.
But it connected with people.
Because it resonated. Because here's the thing. Is the other thing we're forgetting here is that this glam rock was disconnected from reality.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
It was portraying a life that was not livable. Endless flowing cocaine and booze
unrelatable life,
like,
too.
Yeah, like it's like this is not like people can't make most people can't make a living off that.
Right.
Right?
It was much easier to relate to like the Ramones
right.
in the 70s than it would be to relate to Skid Row or somebody like that.
In a sense, Nirvana was like a second punk.
They were influenced by punk and many other things. You don't need to write me letters, folks. I know that. Smells Like Teen Spirit was on Nevermind, which was actually their second album. They had another
album,
one, Bleach. Like I said, it happened to be them.
Yeah.
I don't think, I'm going to say this now, I could be wrong. I don't think grunge killed hair metal. I think that's too simplistic.
I think grunge changed the mood, Joe.
I think it changed the mood, and I think it replaced hair metal as far as the popular rock of its day.
Yeah.
I don't think it killed it. I think
I think it was a
was
buzzkill, Joe. I think it was the music stopped in a sense, right, for them.
In a way, yeah.
That
I do agree
the
with.
The party's over, guys.
Yes.
Close up the bar, right?
Right.
It's like that's what this felt like.
Because one of the things that had been going on as we got into the 90s, 90, 91, 92 with hair metal was this over-reliance on the aforementioned power ballad, doing acoustic sets. Let's not forget, though, this genre, by 1991, 92, had been popular for the better part of a decade.
And that's not how long things usually last.
Think about the boy band craze of the 96 to
Went to
2000,
2004-ish, 5
maybe, or the teen pop princess phase of all them.
But that was all mixed together. That was all the same era.
But I'm just saying, this was a pretty long run that it had.
It
right?
was.
If you really think about it.
See, the thing is that I think is it probably wouldn't have ended if something as stark as Smells Like Teen Spirit didn't come along.
Well, I agree with you.
Something had to not, like, sure, maybe it was a powder keg, right? That it was ready to go. But something had to come to make it get out of here.
Well, I totally agree with you, Quinn. I totally agree, because what had happened, too, is that it all started to just kind of sound the same. Like, the singers kind of sound the same, the production sounds the same, the solos sound the same, right? It's predictable and formulaic.
Because it's easy money.
Right. It's one thing if you're standing in a field of people with white shirts and you're wearing pink, you're going to stand out. And that's what hair metal was when it started. But now if it's a field of pink shirts and a band like Nirvana comes in wearing a black shirt, now they're going to stand out.
Right.
That's what I think it was.
That's good. Yeah.
Thank you. Because I think that's really what it was.
They were a black sheep.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. There had been enough of this. It was perceived as inauthentic, excessive, decadent, unrealistic.
And
like
here's
you
the
said.
same thing. As soon as the executives got wind of what Nirvana was, all of a sudden, everything was going to be like this now.
And
right?
it was for a few years.
It didn't last long.
A few years.
But the record company sure raced to do this.
Well, yeah.
Right? It was like, they were like, we got to get it now.
Where's our Nirvana? We need a Nirvana, because Geffen had Nirvana.
What they didn't anticipate was hip-hop.
Well, that's
and gangster rap, right? Like that kind of cut right into that.
And
was
a lot of female artists, too, really.
And Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston.
R&B,
and all that,
a lot of stuff.
But like what they didn't, I think they thought, because rock, here's the thing that's very interesting about the end of hair metal and why I consider it actually like maybe the proper end of rock as the top genre.
Okay. Go ahead.
No, seriously.
Make your case.
It's the last time, in my eyes, that rock and roll was completely uncontested. It was so money-making for the record companies, right? Nirvana changed it, but it wasn't happy music.
Well, that's true.
And suddenly, people were looking for Mariah. They were looking for something different.
And then they hit upon the boy bands and Britney
and hip-hop, too.
And hip-hop, too, obviously, yeah.
Right? And hip-hop
R&B.
could be its own... See, hip-hop had the freedom because it was a completely
an
new
evolving
style
genre,
of music.
Yeah.
So it could do all sorts of stuff. Like at the beginning, it was serious. It was about real issues, and then it got super fun in the mid '90s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and to me, it was really hard for rock to ever be number one.
So are you saying that Nirvana killed rock?
Not that they killed rock. It's just that, like,
Just kidding.
I just think it's more of a quiet end to rock being the number one thing.
To a harder brand of rock, because you had bands like the Goo Goo Dolls who really went radio friendly and were really big, and the Gin Blossoms had hits, bands
they
like
did.
that.
Again, they kept branding it as alternative, not rock. I feel like the word rock became old school. You know what I mean? Like in the 90s was really it.
Yeah, it revived in the 2000s again, man. The Foo Fighters were always a big part of that scene, and even the bands that I don't like Nickelback and bands like that.
It never retained what it, this unparalleled dominance is what I mean.
It's also been about 30-something years since this, and about 30 years. There's so many more radio stations, and no one watches friggin' TV anymore. I mean, they do. You know what I mean.
They watch YouTube.
Yeah, so
which
nothing is dominant.
Just on the side note, ironically, seems like the best vehicle for music videos, but it seems to not happen. You know what I mean? It's like perfect. It's like short videos. It seems like, hey, we would need music videos to fill all of this, right?
It's true. I do want to mention again the bands that we're talking about, like Nirvana, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Stone Temple Pilots. all the alternative rock bands, they're all lumped together. They're really not the same. The reason they're lumped together is because they were all different. That's what they were all different than what had been on the radio.
Yeah.
They're not really the same. And like Quinn mentioned, R&B played a contributing factor as well, and hip hop in the early and mid 90s. But really, though, once hair metal started to die off around 91, 92, fashion-wise or music-wise, it didn't seem like it was missed. It seemed like everybody was ready to move on. Like, once hair metal died, the 80s ended.
Well, here's the thing. Everything became more real.
Yeah, like look at Nirvana. 3 guys wearing regular clothes,
But there was
shuffling
that
around.
Seattle look.
Yeah,
that, you know, like what hair metal was. I mean, you would never see somebody like that walk in the streets in the 90s. And if you did, you were like, "Is this like Wayne's World or something?"
Yeah, it's a costume party you're going to.
Yeah, it was considered silly.
But it's fascinating how quickly it died off, right?
I think because it was over the top to begin with.
Yeah, so
right?
it wasn't hard to. Yeah,
Well,
okay.
it wasn't hard to kick, right?
Just cut your fucking hair and wear the flannel.
Yeah, like
I'm cured.
Yeah, exactly. It was not. Man, I really miss doing that. Having tons of hairspray and wearing tight leather pants that like hurt. Right?
That must be very. I've never worn leather trousers, and if any of you have, please let us know how that feels.
Wearing that in the summer.
That's got to chafe, man.
Yeah.
That's
Holy shit.
By some cream.
Yeah.
But yeah, the music became much more down to earth. No frills, no accoutrement, if you will.
And if it was glamorous, it was more of a female, like glitter,
exactly,
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because in the 80s, it wasn't about the music. Hair metal is not about the lyrics. It's not about making you think. It's about having a good time.
It's about partying.
Right.
Yeah.
The 90s, the artists, with varying degrees of success, wanted to make it more about the music and more about the lyrics and making you think.
They want what they wanted. I always felt this is in the 90s what they wanted. They wanted another 60s. They wanted this is going to be like a political and like
but like
the stuff
the
they
Bob
were
Dylan 60s.
right.
The
But I
Joan
always thought it was
60s.
funny because the stuff they were fighting for sometimes was a lot lesser.
But yeah, I mean, people's fashions changed, people's tastes evolved throughout the 90s. But as with anything, there remained a fondness for the nostalgia of hair metal, particularly amongst maybe people that were in their early 20s in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
Now they're in their late 30s in the late 90s, and they're like, "Oh, I remember that song." Kind of like we're doing, being in our late 30s doing this. But Monsters of Rock was an album that came out in 1998.
It's been brought up ad nauseum in this podcast, but it's because it's when we grew up, and this was what the hell, Joe? Like, I cannot say how many times I saw this stupid commercial in my life.
This 35-track collection is not sold in stores. To order, call the number on your screen or send check or money order. 2 CDs, $26.99. 2 cassettes, $21.99. Rush delivery available.
So I'm just going to run down the track listing. Come On, Feel the Noise, Quiet Riot. Once Bitten, Twice Shy by Great White. Poison, the song by Alice Cooper.
See, Alice Cooper just lumped in.
See, I don't know if that's I guess it clarifies. I guess it qualifies, I should say. I guess it does. Final Countdown by Europe, Round Around by Rat, Cherry Pie Warrant, Here I Go Again, Whitesnake.
How is Final Countdown part of that? Like, it does not feel like the same thing.
Well, take a look at Europe and you'll understand why.
Well, just because they look like that? But like, the song sounds like
it's more of an epic.
It's like it's closer to like
it's more like Queen than it is
like
hair metal.
Queen,
It's more like Queen.
I was gonna say new wave, but it's
No.
It's like this epic arena thing.
It's
or
like
whatever.
Queen.
It's like a song you'd play at a hockey game or something.
Sure.
You know?
Any time they want to play it, I'm fine with it. Every Rose Has Its Thorn by Poison, 17 by Winger, Cult of Personality by Living Color. That is not a hair metal song.
That is what a weird choice.
That is not.
Who published this? Warner or something?
Razor and Tie.
Who they own by? They're probably just some fake ass label for some big conglomerate.
Who are they?
Concord.
They're distributed by Universal Music Group.
Yeah, but their parent company.
Concord. Anyway, we have We're Not Gonna Take It, Twisted Sister. You've Got Another Thing Coming, Judas Priest. That is not glam metal. It's just regular friendly metal. Remember Nobody's Fool by Cinderella?
Yep.
Hold On Loosely is not a friggin' glam metal song. That's 38 Special.
So the way they advertised this, right?
Yeah.
They didn't show those. They showed the ones where it's like some video where it's clearly a fucking like heavy metal thing.
Does this have the skydiving guy, or is that
It
on
does.
something?
So it's like interspersed with the guy. Like he gets in the plane, and then they play more videos, and then he jumps out of the plane. And he's like, "Whoa, monsters rock!" Or something. He says something into the camera, and he's
That's
like
funny.
in the sky.
It's Monsters of Rock!
Turn Up the Radio by Autograph and Sister Christian. Remember that one by Night Ranger. And then, of course, 1 year later, in 1999, June 29th, there was Monster Ballads, because we have to celebrate the power ballad.
They taught us how to love.
Give us something to believe in.
They taught us how to live. And now they're back.
Heaven by Warrant, Something to Believe In by Poison, High Enough by Damn Yankees, Almost Paradise by Mike Reno and Ann Wilson, Is This Love by Whitesnake, To Be With... That's not a... I guess it is, right?
I guess so.
To Be With You by Mr. Big. Carrie by Europe, Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone, Cinderella, More Than Words by Extreme, Headed for a Heartbreak by Winger, When I Look in Your Eyes by Firehouse, Wind of Change by Scorpions. Remember? Scorpions got in on the power ballad
They
shit?
did.
They did.
I mean, everyone was in on it back then.
I'll Never Let You Go by Steelheart, When I See You Smile, Bad English. Don't Close... Are they? Don't Close Your Eyes by Kix, and When I'm With You by Sheriff. So... That's just a little breakdown there for
But
those
people
of you.
remember this.
I remember
That's
the
thing.
commercials very well.
Yeah, it was just all over the place.
Now, there was, and there still is, a bit of a revival musically. One of the bands, notably, that had a hit with it was The Darkness, I Believe in a Thing Called Love. Do you remember that song, 2003?
Oh, yeah. I believe in a thing called love.
Should we take a listen? I think we should take...
I haven't heard it in years.
I think we should take a listen to it. It's got that vintage... It's self-aware.
What's funny about this, though, it didn't like spark anything. It was just like, oh, that's fun, and then like
Oh,
it's
that's
not like
fun.
it's not like people like made more of this.
No. But they went for it. You know what I mean? They went for a retro sound, and nobody was doing that in the mainstream. But I gotta say, I have to mention this band, Steel Panther. Steel Panther is a parody of these 80s glam metal bands. And Steel Panther, folks, if you've never heard them, I encourage you, if you have even a passing interest in this, to check them out. Feel the Steel, which came out in 2009. Yes, 2009. It sounds like it could have been made in 1987, man. Just listen to this, Quinn.
Yeah.
And
already.
The dueling guitars immediately.
Yeah.
It's every parody you could think of.
Also, like old, like retro style video games always have this kind of music.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, yeah, it's like the 80s, guys. It's heavy metal.
Look, he's doing the David Lee Roth streaks. But the lyric, listen to the lyrics.
She's looking good from head to toe.
It's just so parody.
Yeah.
It's
pretty good.
Ready to blow. Got her teeth like a razor.
It's just such a parody, and I just found it very funny. So check out Steel Panther, folks, if you want to. It's intended to be a joke. But anyway, hair metal, I think, Quinn, does it not remain an emblem of the 1980s?
Absolutely. I mean, it is symbolic of the 1980s. It's one of the things you think of the most.
The hair.
The hair. You know, there's other scenes and stuff you think of, but the hair metal stuff was probably the loudest.
Well,
right?
that's a great way to put it. In
Not-
more
not-
ways than one.
More than just the actual music. I
Right.
mean, just like the look and all that.
Right.
It's just, it typifies. Like when you think 1980s costume,
Yeah.
right? You think
right.
of big hair.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely true.
You might mix a bunch of other things together, but like
you think of big hair.
For men it was the big hair because
Yep.
like those metal guys, right?
And leather. A lot of leather.
It was interesting too because it is a very different take on big masculine men. Like back in those days was like we did pro wrestling podcasts, right? I mean,
What?
But what I mean to say is like that leaked into those muscle men had big hair too.
Oh, tons
like,
of
you
big
know,
hair
and it's
all
all
over.
from this.
Lots of spandex, lots of pink, you know?
and it's interesting, right? Because there's no era like that where like that look
not at all
was
fashionable,
mainstream, right?
Yeah, that's
to
a
the
good
point of like parody of the entire decade.
That's a great point. Yeah, it is.
Right.
It almost parodies the 80s. And for those that were around to experience it, I'm sure it is fondly remembered or hated. Maybe you hated it. You hated glam metal. I don't know. Like we said in the top, I like it. I like it in proper doses, though.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite genre of music. You know, I'm not going to listen to every single Poison album tomorrow or anything like that. You know, I'm just not.
You might, though,
I might.
depending on what you mix in here, and then when you're demixing it in, you'll be like, huh.
I do like Whitesnake, though.
Yeah.
But anyway, we hope you guys like this. And again, please don't be offended if we've mislabeled any band, you know, contrary to your liking. We apologize for that. We're trying to speak in somewhat broad strokes here. And for any songs or artists that we forgot, we apologize, and we'll send you a handwritten postcard. Quinn will.
Postcard.
Postcard, yes, in the mail. But really, we just wanted to kind of celebrate and discuss the genre, the fad, and the decade that was hair metal, really, if you really think about it. So we hope you guys liked this one, and if you didn't, don't worry. Next week, we will be back for something completely different. But until that time, be sure to follow us on Twitter at AWM Podcast and join our group. Next week is something else, but until that time, I'm Joe Morata, that is Michael Quinn, and we'll see you next week for more Acid Wash Memories.
See ya.
Like what you heard? Be sure to leave a review and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We will see you next week.